Good evening, everyone. It's great to have you back. We've had quite a few memorable debates and some funny moments here on Reid Between the Lines, and this week we dedicate our entire show to the very best moments and debates we've had thus far. We invite you, as always, to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/RBTL Sports and to follow us on Twitter at RBTL Sports. It's time to Reid Between the Lines. Are there more headshots in the NFL or NHL, or is there more attention on them? On this week's Four Downs, we're talking concussions in professional sports. As always, we invite you to join the conversation at facebook.com/RBTL Sports, as well as on Twitter at RBTL Sports. We welcome to the show our first female panelist, Andy Bennett, covers sports over at Daybreak on CBC. Great to see you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
To your right is Jay Farrar, radio personality at TSN 690. They're very outspoken. Heard a lot about you. Great to see you on the show. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
To my left is David Hurley, RBTL contributor and co-host. Great to see you.
Great to be back.
Concussions. It's been a sticking point in professional sports for a very long time. Are there more of them, or is there more attention on them?
Oh, there's definitely a lot more attention on them. I mean, especially in the NFL. If you look since 2009 to 2014, we've had over 25 cases, or 52 cases, excuse me, of CTE after death. So what they've been doing is they had the lawsuit for $750 million, which is horrible. So since 2009, you look at the stats in a game, you had an average of 6 players that had concussions per game, and now in 2014, we're looking at 16 players per game. So there's definitely a little bit more knowledge since they had the settlement for 750 mil. So there is a lot more attention. People are more aware to it.
But is there not a double standard in the sense that you look at Jeremy Roenick and how many concussions he's suffered over the course of his career? It was never labeled a concussion. It's one of the reasons
that he knows about.
They didn't exactly didn't know what it was about. So do you feel that that plays into the numbers and this whole hype up about being concussion, obviously being so quick to judge it as a concussion?
Well, there's I mean, it's a matter of misdiagnosis or non-diagnosis. If you go back to the 70s, the word concussion meant you're okay. You can go back into the game now. It used to be like, the player get injured, he'd go back in the locker room.
Ice pack.
Yeah, is my brain coming out of my skull? No, dude, you have a concussion? Get back in there, man.
Yeah.
You're fine. You're not going to remember half of your career, but you're going to be okay. It's just that now the science is advanced enough, and now they can finally diagnose and see what's going on with these guys. And it's just a little bit more precise. So the diagnosis is there, you get it more and more and more, and that's why you're hearing more and more about it. And they're discovering how dangerous it is as well. Whereas back in the day, just briefly, you could hear it in some of the players that were playing in the 60s and 70s. If you hear Jim Brown talk,
they're like punch drunk.
They're punch drunk.
Yeah.
Well, there
They're
was that
drunk.
season a couple of years ago. There was this, a rash of former enforcer deaths, and a lot of these guys donating their brains to science. And I think that's the problem now, is that we just don't know. You don't know if there were more concussions back then because it was just called getting your bell rung. We don't even know how many concussions there are now, and they still don't even know the real effect of concussions and cumulative concussions.
And I don't think they've done a lot to prevent them either, right? We've only done about 10%. There's a study that came out saying that the steps that have been taken is very minimal. I mean, the leagues are not stepping up to the plate here. Because per game, it's still sitting about 5.8, 5.9 concussions per 100 games. And that hasn't changed over the last 5-6 years. So you think more is being done, but really
they're starting to act on it. And you mentioned the lawsuit in the NFL, and that's been a huge thing to get people talking about it and force them to do something about it, because you're hitting them where it hurts in the pocketbook. But I mean, everything is sort of like the NHL concussion protocol. That has been revised, but we saw as recent as last season in the playoffs where that concussion protocol was not followed. If you actually read the protocol, with that hit to Dale Weiss, he was back out on the ice. He was supposed to go to the quiet room, and he was back out on the ice. I think it was under 5 minutes.
How much responsibility lands on the player?
A ton. I mean, they know what's going on, and they know their own bodies. I mean, at one point they have to acknowledge there's more to life after than your hockey career. That's why they need to really take care of it. The onus is on them. They really have to take care of themselves.
I totally disagree.
Yeah, you can't say that to them in the moment.
Absolutely.
In the moment. They're going to go out there, and these guys,
literally,
listen, there's millions and millions of dollars at stake. They're going to go out there, and they're going to do as much damage as they can to them. They're going to say, well, we have to take care of each other more. Listen, These guys are, in the end, it's a paycheck. It's all about winning, and they're going to hit guys as much as they can. And it's not like they're any nastier than they used to be. If you look at footage back in the 70s, these guys, they're committing felonies on the ice.
Yeah, but
these guys are trying to murder each other, you know? So it is not as
and you see that you see that even more in football, right? The prestigious not losing your position, not losing your job. You miss 2 or 3 games because of an injury.
You can lose your job for sure.
You look at Smith and you look at Kaepernick and you look at what happened there and how he sees the opportunity.
Nobody wants to be a 3rd and 10, third string left tackle. Nobody wants to be that. Exactly. You want to get out there.
No hockey player, no professional football player, nobody who plays that kind of intense sport with that physicality is ever going to take themselves out of the game. I mean, you cannot put that. You can't put that onus on the player. You have to take that completely away.
There should be a little bit of an onus, but especially with the teams have to be doing more.
Yeah, and the league too. I think the league has to step up as well. I heard recently instigating or implementing a rule where the person aggressing would be out for the same amount of time, right? If there was a bigger penalty to pay for those types of moves, maybe would discourage them to do it. You look at Steckel on Crosby, right? Why is Steckel playing before Crosby when Crosby's out almost to a year for that injury, right?
I don't agree with that one. I do agree the way that the NHL does is suspensions for headshots. I mean, if you looked at 2013,
I don't think it's severe enough. I don't think it's severe enough.
In 2012, excuse me, they had 6 suspensions for headshots. The following year, 16. So at least there's an improvement there. And they take away suspensions. They suspend you for an amount of games. Where in the NFL, if you do a headshot, they'll fine you $50,000. Yeah. When you're making $6 million, it's pocket change. Who cares? I'm going to take you out of the game, and I'll spend that 50 grand
for you at night.
Exactly. It's at the end of the
They
road
are
for
getting more serious, but I mean, I agree with you. I don't think the penalties for headshots, the ones that are clear headshots, where the guy I mean, yes, it's a fast game, it's a fast-paced game. There's going to be collisions, but if they actually wanted to take some of this out, if they wanted to curb fighting the way they say they want to, the suspensions would be much longer.
Punishment, I don't think punishment's going to do anything. We're talking a matter of science. We're talking about physics here. These guys are bigger, faster, stronger than they ever used to be. The equipment they're wearing is like armor. So obviously the NHL is going to go after the players when some kind of headshot is committed, but they shouldn't be doing that. Make the arenas bigger. Change the basics of the game itself. Can't do that because you're hitting the pocketbook of the owners. Yeah. You can't take away 3 rows in the arena. Yeah. When all you have to do is, I mean, I'm not saying going European size arena, but go halfway. Maybe there's a point. Yeah, compromise. There's a point where you can meet and say, listen, let's take away 2 rows over there. We're going to have less headshots. Players are going to have a little bit more space. If you go to an NHL game and you watch it live, it doesn't look anything like it does on TV. It's really, it's fast. Condensed, it's fast. These guys are passing each other at tremendous speeds, and frankly, it's crowded. There's nowhere to move.
You'll have a tough time with the purists, though. Yeah. The purists won't allow that to happen. They want to keep the essence of the game, the record's the same, etc. But I love the energy. Stay right there, guys, because I want to switch topics. I want to talk about team and David Desharnais. You covered the team quite a lot. I want to see what you think about David Desharnais being a first-line centerman. Is he a pretender or a contender? Stay with us. All that and more, all right here on Reid Between The Lines.
I'm a veteran, I'm 32, I know what to do, so I'm very and really focused on my job December 6th, and after that, after I take care of business on December 6th, I'm gonna aim on 2015.
Is Jean-Pascal a pretender or a contender at 175? This week, courtesy of EliteSportsTours.com, we're talking JP and his upcoming fight this Saturday. You don't want to miss it. If you're expecting a Mickey Rourke type fight, that's not going to happen. It's going to be a beauty. We welcome back Pierre Bernier to the show, Pierre Evans-Just, and David Hurley. Gentlemen, welcome back. All right, huge matchup on Saturday. Huge implications for Jean-Pascal specifically. Pretender or contender at 175?
I think Jean-Pascal is definitely a contender. I mean, how could you not be? 2 great fights with a living legend, Bernard Hopkins. Beat Chad Dawson. Definitely a contender.
He's done it before.
But people have criticized his bravado. People have criticized in the sense of his mental game and have a little bit too much swag, if you want to call it that way, if I'm trying to be politically correct. But do you think that now, I know you covered him in media day, and he seems to be a little bit changed from a mental standpoint?
Oh, he's been in the game for a while. He's been champion before, like you mentioned. He's fought Chad Dawson before. He's always had the confidence,
exciting.
But you can tell by seeing him that the confidence now leads to he's more mature. He mentioned that he has his daughter. He's a father. You can tell that his attitude's changed a little bit. And on top of it, he has a good corner. He has Rogers in his corner now. So he's more down to earth, but he always keeps the same level of confidence. So that's important.
I want you gentlemen to listen to what Jean-Pascal had to say when Pierre asked him about his legacy. Have a listen.
I'm not fighting for money because boxing is my passion. I love the sport. I love to be a boxer, but right now, because I made money, I'm boxing for my legacy. I want to leave my mark on this earth when I leave the planet. I'm fighting for legacy. I'm fighting for history. That's why I'm always trying to face the best, like Kovalev, Stevenson, Bernard Hopkins, Chad Dawson, Diakonou. At my level, it's all about the legacy. It's all about the history.
He seems more confident. He seems more down to earth. There's no doubt there's been a change. It was a great question, by the way. What do you think about Jean-Pascal? Pretender or contender?
I think Jean-Pascal's a pretender, and it hurts me to say that because Jean-Pascal is a Quebec fighter, and I always like to see them do very well. I mean, he beat Lucien Boutte, which was a decision. He did. Boutte looked a little slow in that fight. But his wins, I mean, his win against, Dawson was a headbutt that really kind of gave him the edge. Yeah. Against Bernard Hopkins,
winning the fight.
He was winning the fight. He was winning the fight, but the headbutt really gave him the edge that pushed him over the top. And then Hopkins, he didn't really look that dominant. The draw, he didn't win most of the rounds that he thought he had won. I thought actually Bernard Hopkins had won that fight. So Bernard Hopkins should have won both those fights. I have a hard time seeing him do well, and if he has to win this fight and go against Kovalev,
guys, but remember the Froch fight? He went down there to fight Froch and put up a
he gained more
tremendous
from
fight
losing than
with
actually
little
winning.
experience.
He did win.
As a young fighter. I think all.
And you can see what happened to Boutte when he actually made the same trip. I think he's definitely a contender. He's won the title before. He's a #1 contender for both belts, for Stevenson and for Kovalev. And that's saying something. That means that he's actually recognized as a threat. And that's not nothing. And he knows that. And his opponents know that as well. You can tell that that Kovalev might be interesting in finding him. Stevenson, on the other hand, we've heard the back and forth on social media lately.
He's going to fight. I think Kovalev is going to have more of a chance of fighting him. I think Kovalev wants this fight because I think Kovalev is going to knock him out, unfortunately.
And I think it's a style issue, too. I think Jean-Pascal is a contender, but with some reservations because it's very often a style issue when it comes to boxing.
Never clear cut.
You look at the trifecta of Chad Dawson, Jean-Pascal, and Bernard Hopkins. Yeah. Some of them win, some of them lose, depending on who you're facing.
Though, at the end of the day,
fought Adrian Diakonou with one arm.
At
one point.
Styles make fights, and I believe that Jean-Pascal right now, he's in the driver's seat. Because both fights, let's say he fights Stevenson or he fights Kovalev, the biggest fights are made through him. And he's aware of that, and you can tell.
But yet the public wants to see it.
At media, he even mentioned that as well. The biggest fights are going through him because at the moment.
But that's funny though. But that's interesting because, sure, he's a huge draw. Yeah. But when you poll the public, right, the public doesn't want to see him.
If you poll the U.S. public, obviously,
no, but
he's
you're
not.
saying he's a huge draw. He wasn't even the main card on this fight. Boutte was supposed to be the main card. So he's not that big of a draw if you think about it.
He's a bigger draw than Stevenson.
Well, Stevenson's the champion, and I think if Stevenson fights him, Stevenson might even knock him out too. But Stevenson's got some punching power that he doesn't have.
Is it a matter of the fight? Are we talking about him being a draw or the fight itself?
I could put in my 2 cents.
Absolutely.
One thing we're not looking at is Jean-Pascal has a terrific chin.
He took a lot of punches. You're right. Absolutely right.
Punches from everybody. Diakonou, I mean, what makes you think? What makes us all think that Adonis Stevenson could knock him out?
Because Adonis Stevenson hasn't taken as many punches in his career. He's still a little bit younger in his fight game, although by age he's older.
Yeah, but
he still has a little bit
more and lost to. I mean, he did lose. He did get knocked out by Donald Boone, which is not nothing. It's definitely a stain on his record, and even though he's champion now, it's significant.
I like what I heard from Jean-Pascal when he was asked a question by one of the reporters about Adonis Stevenson, and he's like, I'm not thinking that far ahead. I'm focused on this fight. And I think that's a wise thing. And I think a couple of years back, you wouldn't have heard that from Jean-Pascal.
That
shows maturity. How exciting, though, changing gears is it for Quebec boxing? You look at Interbox, you look at Groupe Yvon Michel, Jim. It's a great time to be a boxing fan in Canada, in Quebec specifically.
Let's look at this undercard on this particular night on December 6th. They've got a great undercard. They've got Eye of the Tiger Management Fighters, one of the youngest Canadian amateur champions on the card, Stephen Butler, Schiller Hippolyte, WBC Continental of America's champion. I mean, it's a great, great card. On the same night, David Lemieux is fighting
Rosado,
Barclays Center, New York City. And the fight will be shown live.
Quebec boxing is becoming one of the most prolific fighting cards. I mean, we're growing fighters.
Look, is holding a professional card on December 19th in Repentigny on the same night as a world championship card pro in Quebec City. We've never seen this in Quebec, never.
But I think
two on the same night.
I think it's very important. If they've learned any lessons from the Boutte and Pascal fight, that should have been made years ago. And when it was made, it was very profitable. It made a lot of money. It was a big marquee fight, but it was not the fight that it could have been when both of these guys were. They were champions and they were at the top.
That's a long-going argument.
Now you have, and if you take a look at what's going on with Mayweather and Pacquiao, I hope that Interbox and Groupe Yvon Michel have learned from these mistakes and they try to
give the fans what they want.
They give the fight. We understand that Kovalev and Stevenson's a big fight, but in terms of the drawing power that they can have in Quebec, two local guys, they have to make that fight.
Before we go, it's a great point. Great to welcome you to the show. Thanks for stepping up on short notice. Great. Hopefully we'll have you back. I know you've got a lot going on. Where can people catch you? In the ring and doing your thing.
Well, you could check out my website, pierrebernier.net, and always on Facebook. I look forward to talking with fight fans, MMA fans, boxing fans. Facebook, you could find me under my name, and I'd love to hear from the fans out there.
The face-off segment is up next. Can we get you through a little boxing match, a little boxing call for us?
Ladies and gentlemen, after the break, we will be right back with the face-off segment.
Hey, what up, guys? It's me, JP, J to the P, Jean-Pascal, and right now you're watching Reid Between the Lines.
Every champion in their respective field needs to be surrounded by the very best trainers and coaches. And there's none better than strength and conditioning coach Jonathan Chainberg, and he joins me as I face off against him. Great to see you. Thanks for taking the time.
Good to see you too.
You have an incredible career path. World-class wrestler on the Canadian level. Things change. There's an accident. I had a chance to follow in your story. It's quite the story. Talk to us about how you got involved in APC and strength and conditioning.
Well, I started off, like you said, as a wrestler. I like the one-on-one aspect of competing. I used to compete in different sports, but I was drawn to wrestling. I had a few concussions, too many, and during one of the breaks of actually not being able to do anything, I just started getting into training people. I was already in Concordia with the exercise science program, and I started training people in the break. I started training some of the wrestlers on the team just as a spare hobby, and it got more advanced. I started training the national team, some Olympians, some gold medalists, and from there I found George through the wrestling club. Started training him.
George St. Pierre, might I add.
Yeah, George St. Pierre. Started training a lot of guys associated with mixed martial arts through George, Rashad Evans, Nate Marquardt, those guys. And through hockey, through tennis, I have all-stars in baseball. So it was a nice transition, all the while I was still training my regular clientele, so it worked well.
Talked about ego with regards to some of these athletes. Some of them, sure, are trained, they're athletes, they're professionals, but I'm sure you've come across a couple of guys who are stubborn as hell to try and get them to do something. Do you feel that the ego plays into it with professional athletes? The higher you go up in ranking and status of these athletes, you've worked with Christopher Letang, you've worked with Trish Stratus, to name a few. You feel that the ego plays into it when they come into your gym? Do they think that they'll have a new secret formula and they won't be broken down by you and your ways?
It's different because the higher athlete I've trained, I mean, Christopher Letang is a multiple-time All-Star. Russell Martin was an All-Star. George St. Pierre was probably one of the greatest mixed martial artists ever. Roy McDonald. These are the most humble guys. They're the ones who work the hardest. They're the ones who don't give you lip back.
Complain.
They actually do what they have to do. They might complain jokingly here or there, but they'll always train the hardest. They're the ones who self-motivate themselves. So they're the people you have the least amount of problems with.
Because of their work ethic and how they've trained themselves, etc. George obviously is a whole different beast, and I'm sure you're asked this all the time, and it's a fair reason because he's that much of a special athlete. A lot of people compare him to Michael Phelps in the sense of his strength and conditioning, his body being built for his respective sport. Do you think that it's more than just that? Do you think that this is a natural gift that's been given to him, or has he really worked at it harder than anybody else you've seen come through that gym?
I think it's definitely a combination. I mean, I've told everybody that when you have an athlete special like George, like Floyd Mayweather, these guys can take a different path as long as they're training hard and practicing their respective sports and still be world champions. That's how good they are. That's how hard they work. So George has put in so much volume, no matter what he does. Floyd Mayweather the same way, is that they're going to succeed no matter what. But it just so happens that they push themselves harder than anybody in every single practice they do. They won't miss practice. I know people who've come to Montreal to try and keep up with George. George could be going out every night of the week, even if he can't sleep. He's there in the gym the next morning, no matter when the practice is being called for, and nobody can hang with him. The amount of volume and workload he puts in is different than any other athlete.
I want to talk to you real quick about the evolution of strength and conditioning. I'm sure it's changed over the years, and you've been a pioneer of that, one of the main reasons why it's changed. Where do you see the biggest changes? Are we talking more on the strength standpoint? Is it more on the conditioning? Is it more the awareness? Do athletes now believe in it? Do they see the benefit of it?
It's a combination of everything, but just the fact that we're getting away from the old school way of training. Athletes are coming up, they're training with Olympians, with professional, let's say a coach that trains a lot of football players. Anyways, not so much the boxing mixed martial arts training where it was long distance running, not a lot of weights, being scared to do weights because you didn't want to be stiff. But now they're working their power, they're doing a lot of Olympic lifts, med ball work, they're pushing sleds, stuff you've never seen before in the old days. So it's progressed, and what's happening is now is coaches are getting smarter, they're educating themselves, so you don't see as much problem when it comes to overtraining. They're just well aware of diet. It's a complex industry, but at least the coaches are starting to catch up now and school themselves on what it takes to build a champion.
Well, speaking of building champions, you've got quite a few of those over at APC. Talk to us a little bit about where we can catch you and some of this fun stuff that you're involved with, including the gym. Where can people catch some more information about you? Adrenaline
Performance Center. It's apcgym.com. You can come train alongside the Christopher Lestangs, Roy McDonald's, Jean Pascal's. Anybody who's anybody when it comes to performing in Montreal should be at this gym. And any other client who wants to come, just get better, get in shape, lose weight, gain strength, gain mass, whatever you want, we have it for you there.
All right, we're going to have a little bit of fun with you as always on our rapid fire segment. We always like to ask you a few questions. You just tell me what you think. First thing that comes to mind. You ready to go?
Let's go.
Hardest working athlete you've ever worked with?
Georges St-Pierre.
What's the deal with mashed potatoes and cinnamon? What's up with that?
I love mashed potatoes as a meal, and cinnamon, I eat it on everything.
What athlete would you not want to run into in a dark alley?
Shane Carwin.
What's the craziest injury you've ever seen in training, most out of the ordinary?
Broken toe.
If I had an Egg McMuffin and a hash brown this morning, what would you make me do in the gym this afternoon?
Something that would make you throw up that Egg McMuffin and hash brown.
What's the one thing that drives you absolutely crazily with athletes that they do in the gym?
Take too many breaks.
And last but not least, how long would it take you to whip me into shape?
Not too long. Give me 2 months.
I got a compliment for John Chamberlain. Thanks for taking the time. Great to
pleasure.
see you. Stay with us. The rant is up next. You don't want to go anywhere. The Big Bad Bruins, 2011 Stanley Cup champions. Last season's President's Trophy winners as the NHL's best team throughout the regular season. The regular season in which they dropped 3 of 4 went on to fall in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference semifinal at the hands of your Montreal Canadiens. It seems to happen every year, but why? On paper, the Bruins have had the better roster, bigger names, numerous trophy winners, including Vezina Trophy winner Tuukka Rask and the supposed tough scoring forward and defenseman in the league, 6'4", 220-pound, and 6'9", 255-pound Milan Lucic and Zdeno Chara. Not only have they lost the big games of the year, but they always find somehow to feel the need to make plays such as the Pacioretty hit and the Emelin nut shot. And let's not forget everybody's favorite Bruin, Brad Marchand. His constant antics are an embarrassment to the NHL. And for a team that preaches respect and tradition, they fight less than a fair fight. Old-time hockey means fighting your own battles, mano a mano, not mugging a guy who made a perfectly legitimate play within league rules. But that's not the Boston way. They act tough, but when it comes push to shove, they blindside you. Defenders of the Crest will say it's a style, it's toughness. I say it's cowardly. Attempting to intimidate your opponent with long-term injury so they can compete is called bullying. Julians and his band of misfits know that if they play a clean, fair game, they get outskated, outscored, and outskilled. The Bruins like having their cake and eating it too, but like the NHL, otherwise known as Gary Bettman's league, Montrealers don't wear those rose-colored glasses. We see them for who they really are, and that's just a sheep in wolf's clothing. We invite you to join the conversation at facebook.com/RBTL Sports, as well as on Twitter @RBTL Sports. On behalf of the entire team, thanks for being with us. We'll see you next week.
Adam Reid's wardrobe by Carp.ca. Salon services courtesy of Glam Atelier La Maison de Beauté. Guest accommodations provided by Holiday Inn Express and Suites. Catering services by Piatto Rustico, available at piattorustico.com.